Well, good morning, boys and girls. It's lovely to have a Sunday school lesson again and learn about God and God's Word. Well, boys and girls, often we have spoken about sin. And you'll remember that last year I gave you a way to remember what sin is and what sin means. And we remembered it like this. S stands for shove of God. I stands for I'm in charge, and N stands for no to your rule, and that is God's rule. And sin can make us do really, really awful things, and in fact we do sin every single day. And one of the things that sin makes us do is it makes us want things that don't belong to us. Okay, I am sure that you have once wanted something, but you knew that it was actually somebody else's, that it belonged to somebody else. And today, in our lesson, we are also going to learn about someone, quite an important person, who also wanted something that wasn't his. And then he actually took it because he wanted it so much. So boys and girls, we're going to read out of the book called 2 Samuel, as we did last week. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1 to 5, and then verse 14 to 17. 2 Samuel 11, verse 1 to 5, and then verse 14 to 17. And of course, this, as I said in the beginning of the lesson, comes from God's Word. This is the way God speaks to us. This is the way God tells us very, very important things about Him, but also about ourselves. And today we are going to read from the New International Reader's Version, which you can find very easily on the YouVersion app. So boys and girls, let's listen what happens in the story. Kings fight each other in the spring. So David sent Joab with the whole Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They beat the Ammonites completely, and Israel's army started to live all around Rabbah. But David stayed in Jerusalem. One evening, David got out of bed and he walked on the roof of the king's house. From the roof, he saw a woman who was washing herself. She was very beautiful. And David sent a servant to ask who she was. Someone said, "She is Eliam's daughter, Bathsheba, and she is the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent servants to fetch her. She came to him and he slept with her. Then she returned to her home. Bathsheba now had David's baby inside her. So she sent a message to tell David about it. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, and Uriah carried it to Joab. In it he wrote, "Put Uriah in front of all the soldiers where it is most dangerous. Then pull your men away from him so that he is alone. And so the enemy will kill him." So while Joab's soldiers were around the city, Joab put Uriah in front of all the other soldiers, and that was where the enemy was strongest. When some of the enemy soldiers came out of the city to fight, some of David's men died, and Uriah the Hittite died too. So, boys and girls, we see even the king, King David, who is a man after God's own heart, he sins really terribly. First of all, He desires so much to take something that is not his, and this time it is another man's wife, that he actually takes this other man's wife. And what he does then on top of that even is he makes sure that Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, dies in the war. And boys and girls, he didn't just sin against Uriah and against Bathsheba, but he definitely and first and foremost sinned against God. He disobeyed God. What he said actually to God by sinning, by taking what is not his, he said, shove off, God. I'm in charge. No to your rule. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to make my own decision, and my decision is telling me now that I should take another man's wife. So David sins terribly. And after that, very good friend of David, the prophet Nathan, comes to David and tells him, you have sinned terribly against God. And David is actually really sad about what he did. He repents of his sin. He realizes he made a very, very, very bad mistake. And God tells him that he still needs to be punished. But yet God forgives David. And it's the same thing with us. All the sin we do every single day, we are supposed to be punished for it because it's terrible. God cannot handle sin. Sin is horrible. But God is merciful and forgives us our sin. And still there needs to be a price that is paid, the price for our sin. Something or someone needs to be punished. And that is what Jesus did. He came in our place to bear all our sin that deserved punishment, so that we don't need to be punished, and so that we can be forgiven. And that is what we call the gospel, boys and girls. So, very important, King David was just a man as well, even though he was a man after God's own heart, chosen by God. He was still a man, and he disobeyed God as all men do. Well, that's our lesson for today, boys and girls. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye.